Welcome to the first episode of SHI's Research Breakdown. As we've been working on our Research Roundup newsletter, which you can find on SHI's LinkedIn page, we've had a lot of interesting discussions about the research we featured. So we've decided to record some of these conversations and share them in podcast format. I'm Victoria Barber, and while I'm responsible for strategic insights here at SHI, much of my career was spent in the IT and software asset management space. So I'm delighted that for our first podcast, I've managed to persuade Shane Cronin, Head of ITAM at SHI, and Jennifer Kovleski, Director of Product Marketing at Flexera, to join me for a discussion about Flexera's recently published 2025 State of ITAM report. So thank you both very much for joining me. To get us started, let's talk about one of the most frustrating insights from the report, the seeming lack of progress when it comes to audits. So Jennifer, the key stat that we have here from the report is that 45% of organisations paid more than 1 million in audit costs over the past 3 years. So why is audit still up there at the top of the priority list? Why has there been so little improvement over the years and, dare I say, decades?
Thanks, Victoria. Yeah, it hasn't really changed much over the last few years. I think there's two reasons for that. One is that a lot of ITAM organizations are reactive. It's a one and done situation. So they're frantic, they need help. They implement an ITAM solution to help them with that. And then they move on to the rest of their business. The second is that technology is getting really complicated. You have bundles, you have new product use rights with cloud infrastructure. There's just a lot being thrown at ITAM professionals. And so it's not easy if you don't have a robust practice to get it done.
Fundamentally, I completely agree with Jennifer. I think it's important to remember that, yes, it's a terrible stat, but I also think at the same time we have to acknowledge that it is also a really difficult moving target. And fundamentally, it's as long as there's financial upside for the vendor, as long as there's an intense amount of complexity for an organization, it's probably just going to be something that evolves over time and never really goes away.
Yeah. And on top of that, with all these new license metrics, like the vendors aren't making it any easier for ITAM pros, right? Like they don't even expose those new metrics a lot of times in their APIs. So how in the heck are they supposed to manage things? It's like we're almost going backwards sometimes.
Yeah, and I think the difficulty is as well for a lot of ITAM teams really don't get the investment they need. So they're stuck in this reactive cycle. They can't actually move themselves on. They don't have the remit, the resources, the tools they need to do the proactive discovery and inventory and management of entitlements. So they just do it reactively when the audit comes up. And it also means they're not actually delivering the business benefits that they should be because they're so focused on the audit activity at the expense of the strategic ITAM.
100%. I also think it's important to put another lens on the $1 million that organizations are spending, but it's also important that we remember the opportunity that exists. I think it was highlighted that 30% of is still wasted. And in reality, most organizations are, they're spending more than $3 million, which would be a rough estimate of the $1 million that's wasted in audit. So the ROI is tremendous, right? If organizations aren't looking at it and how it can actually drive the business forward, and it is seen as almost like a means to just solving an audit, then it's going to continually be stuck in this reactive mode, I think.
Yeah, and that, as I said in the research roundup, that 30% figure is one that really frustrates me because as that spend is growing, that amount of waste is growing. And yet in those organizations that are mature, we do see that people are able to cut that waste. But we don't see an awful lot of organizations who do have mature asset management functions, but those that are working very differently from the rest.
Yeah, sprawl is a huge problem, and I think we're just going to see that increasing. And the 30% of the waste is like, is that what we know about? And then there's, all the other assets that we don't know about. So like, what's the waste there? And I think understanding the sprawl issue, especially in like AI, right? Like there's so much happening. Like I'm like, okay, I need to get some new AI applications to make my job better, right? Everybody's doing that. So I think we're going to see the problem really grow in terms of the waste because of all the new applications coming on the market.
I mean, I guess it's a repeat of the situation when SaaS first came out, where people were buying it on credit cards. So there was a lot of unknown SaaS in the organizations, and it's going to be probably cyber who find it, or ITAM who find it, or possibly finance who find out about it when somebody decides they don't want it to go on their credit card next year.
Right, we've been here before. We've seen the research not materially move year over year. It's actually quite depressing seeing it sometimes, how little has changed over a long period of time. And I think it's somewhat of a wake-up call, right? Our organization is going to realize the value of ITAM and take it seriously. And then also really think about, how do they mature their practice, right? How do we build a program that ensures that we have the right tooling, the right alignment of stakeholders, the right processes, so that we can move ITAM outside of the operational framework that it's in. And it's more of a governance model, because I think what you're saying, Victoria and Jennifer, is spot on. Here we go again. AI. It's going to be just like SaaS. We see today even FinOps and ITAM coming together because they've been siloed. And I think now there's a realization, oh, maybe that's not necessarily the best thing. And now we're about to do the same thing with AI. And it's kind of, how do we get to the point where we learn that this needs to be a holistic approach to how we manage this infrastructure, rather than breaking everything down into its components?
Yeah. With FinOps, the approach I think has been good in terms of it's very business focused and cost management focused. Like, they have a specific remit. It's not reactive, it's proactive. Whereas the ITAM has been kind of stuck in the audits world, and that is a largely reactive function. So I think having that business tie, and now with SaaS, I think that, you've got that tie to security, which is a very strong remit. Securing the organization, super important. That's a boardroom topic. So I think that if ITAM professionals can tie their goals to those things, they'll be more successful.
Yeah, because there has been in the past a little bit of internal focus into ITAM. So you get conversations where it feels like it's ITAM for ITAM's sake. So it really does need to be about what are the business needs, and how is what ITAM does supporting those business outcomes and business needs, rather than this is what we do in ITAM and this is why. Start joining in more and being part of what makes the business successful.
Yeah, and I think we see that, right? I mean, we're seeing the FinOps Foundation have a strategic partnership with the ITAM Forum. I think that is certainly an indication that there is a need for a more holistic view of all of this. And I think if we could take the best of both worlds, Jennifer, you highlighted kind of like the business outcome side of FinOps, and maybe there's more of like the operational efficiencies of ITAM, and merging those two things together could be really good for the industry. And I think most expect by 2026 that will start to become the norm. But I think it's really important. And it's actually a move that we took at SHI, is to move those two teams together. Because what we're seeing is that when our customers are coming to us to manage this, it's not two different conversations to them, it's one. So it's interesting that we have these multiple disciplines that still sort of address two similar problems that are tangential, but not quite in the same way.
And it's back to that supporting the business outcomes. In order to get the business outcome you need all of these elements together. And I thought it was interesting that in the data about the reporting lines, depending on where the ITAM function was reporting in, somehow it doesn't quite deliver on what the other stakeholders need. And that's certainly something that needs to be solved.
Completely agreed. It's one of the most important things that we actually generally see ITAM organizations lacking, which is a really clear strategy of what the purpose of the ITAM org is. And is that well communicated amongst the organizations? I mean, ITAM can work cross-functionally there as long as there is some ownership, but having a clear understanding of what it is ITAM's actually driving, I think, is often lacking. And sometimes we're focused too much on the tactical of the problem we identified and quickly solved versus the thing we're trying to drive towards.
Yeah, I think ITAM can also help drive the strategy in terms of, if they have the right data, they can shine a light on what the goals should be and then measure that progress towards the goal.
Ultimately, ITAM's a data-based and data-driven function, even if we sometimes complain that we can't get the data we need. But it's about the data and providing the insights to allow those stakeholders to make the right decisions. There are very few business decisions that ITAM leaders can or should be making
100%. I think that's one of the critical things, right? Is you can provide all of those scenarios and opportunities, but at the end of the day, every organization has to prioritize what they do and they don't execute on. Understanding what the business outcomes that we're trying to drive is important, right? If that's margin improvements, security posture, driving new revenues, or if ESG is on the executive agenda, right? All of those things are data points that ITAM will have some influence on. We can give that visibility, but then it's ensuring that we're able to communicate the data that we have through that lens, right? Are the people that we're trying to get the buy-in from or collaborate with, are we all speaking the same language and working towards the same goal? And I think it's clear as well, this is the importance of, I think, the partner community, right? I don't think it's specific to ITAM. I think any org that we would do a report on would say the same thing, but the constraints that exist around headcount and capacity does mean that a lot of ITAM organizations are stuck managing renewals or, buried in audits and data gathering. And that's not really where ITAM orgs want to be either. So it's really important that there is an ecosystem of partners who are able to help bring that right advisory and help bring the discussion to the forefront and market ITAM the right way to help those organizations communicate appropriately. And I think that's sometimes where maybe the branding of ITAM probably lets things down a little bit. It is kind of branded as a problem fixer rather than a business driver.
Yeah, I mean, if you have an internal ITAM team, even if you have a big internal ITAM team, you cannot have the in-depth knowledge of licensing of every single one of your hundreds, if not thousands, of software products from different vendors in-house, because there is no way that those people can keep up with that volume. Whereas your partners can have people who are highly specialized, who really understand in depth the licensing of some really obscure piece of software that you only need to know about once, but they may be talking to people about multiple times a day. So you need to think about what are the things that you do internally, because that's where you provide the value with your understanding of how this applies to your business. What are the things that you can do through automation, through tooling, and what are the things that actually you use partners for, whether it's on an ongoing basis or on an ad hoc basis?
Well, with AI now, which I'm really excited about it, ITM teams can leverage AI to automate things that were like so complicated and error prone. They can automate that by leveraging machine learning and AI to like bring that data in. So a lot of those boring, repetitive tasks that ITAM practitioners complain about a lot, those are going to go away in the near term, I believe.
While I found it very refreshing to read something that didn't revolve around AI, it's clearly come up in the discussion quite a lot. So AI is clearly going to have an impact on ITAM. How do we think it's going to change ITAM by next year?
Well, I think we discussed potential opportunities for it to help ITAM orgs, but I think it's going to hurt ITAM orgs as well quite a lot. The change of the types of licensing that we're going to see being implemented, whether that be token-based or pricing tied to output volume or revenue, all of these things are going to be better defined over the course of the next year. But then there's also security, like how are we actually managing how users are using these generative AI tools. And then more importantly, I don't think we know yet how it's going to be managed. So how are these vendors actually going to enforce compliance? That is a pretty big unknown for us right now. So I think the best thing is that ITAM orgs really need to prep and make sure that we're leveraging our resources to review EULAs proactively, be involved in the process by which we're managing the governance frameworks and the tooling capabilities and working with legal and procurement and security, because at some point we will learn how all this will be governed, and likely we don't want to be caught flat-footed. I think it will become more prevalent.
Yeah, I definitely think sprawl is going to get worse. Governance is going to have to get better. I think you're going to see roles and responsibilities be a little bit different based off of where the software is purchased and where it's run, which is different than it is today. So I think there's just going to be more cooks in the kitchen, which means that there needs to be a higher level of governance in the organization.
That's a very good analogy. It certainly doesn't sound like ITAM is going to be going away anytime soon. And I know that, in the past there have been predictions made that we won't need ITAM anymore. It seems to be going in the opposite direction to that. This has been a really interesting discussion. There's some really useful information in here. There's some really thought-provoking information in the report, as hopefully people can tell from the discussion we've had. Thank you, Shane and Jennifer. Really appreciate your time today and hope you've enjoyed the discussion as well.
I have. Thank you.
It's been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us for today's research breakdown discussion. We hope you enjoyed it and you'll join us again next time. Until then, for more insights into the research we're reading, sign up for our Research Roundup newsletter on SHI's LinkedIn page. SHI Media, you heard it here.